woman was born with unusually large arms, another with 4 legs, and one was born covered in thick hair and was cruelly dubbed the Bear. Others had their lives shattered in an instant, one by acid that melted her face beyond recognition. These are real women who were forced to live through nightmares most of us can't imagine. And yet, every single one of them refused to stay broken. They stood back up and fought through the pain. These stories will shock you, devastate you, and ultimately leave you in tears. Number 10. The woman crushed by her own hands. Imagine living every second of your life carrying weights you cannot put down. For Doangjay Samaksamam, that weight is her own hands. Born in Thailand with an agonizingly rare condition called macrodystrophia lipomatosa, her arms and hands have swollen uncontrollably since childhood, growing until each now weighs nearly 20 pounds. Doctors believe no one else in the world has her condition in both arms to this extent. The result is a life defined by pain. From the time she was a little girl, people stared at her like she was a monster. Doangjay grew up hiding in her house, ashamed and broken by the cruelty of strangers. Decades of isolation followed as her hands grew larger and heavier, dragging down her entire body. "My hands are so heavy, I can barely lift them to comb or shampoo my hair," she admitted. "It's very difficult. Getting dressed is also very difficult and painful." The simplest tasks, eating, writing, even holding a cup, become ordeals that leave her exhausted. At 25, surgeons tried to help. They cut into her swollen tissue, removing pounds of fat and blood. But nothing stopped the relentless growth. Her hands returned, larger, heavier, crueler. Every day she wakes with shooting pain in her arms, shoulders, and back. Even sleeping is torment, because the weight of her own body keeps her pinned. Doctors have whispered the unthinkable. The only way to free her might be to amputate both arms. But Doangjay refuses to surrender her body. Instead, she gets up every morning, lifting hands that weigh nearly 20 pounds each, and pushes through the pain. She runs her small family shop, sorting goods and serving customers while her swollen arms hang heavy at her sides. She cares for her elderly parents, refusing to let them carry the burden she already bears. Every day is a fight against exhaustion and agony, yet she chooses to endure. She lives not in spite of her condition, but in defiance of it, proving that even when her own body tries to break her, her will to live with dignity is stronger. Number 9. The woman the internet called ugliest. Lizzie Velasquez was born in Texas in 1989, with a condition so rare that only a handful of people in the world share it. She has neonatal progeroid syndrome combined with lipodystrophy, which means her body cannot store fat or gain weight. No matter what she ate, her frame remained skeletal. By adulthood, she weighed barely 60 pounds. Her large eyes, sharp facial bones, and frail frame made her look unlike anyone else. From childhood, she was mocked. Classmates called her a skeleton, a freak, a monster. Strangers stared at her mother in public and asked, "Why did you let her live?" But nothing compared to what came when she was just 17. Lizzie logged onto YouTube one day and found herself in a video titled, "The World's Ugliest Woman." Millions of people clicked. The comments were worse than the title. Strangers wrote that she should kill herself, that the world would be better off without her, that she was a waste of space. Some said her parents should have aborted her. She sat in front of the screen reading strangers begging her not to exist. For a teenager already crushed by years of bullying, it was unbearable. She later admitted the video broke her in a way nothing else had. The humiliation was global. She couldn't walk into a store without imagining every person had seen it. But Lizzie did the unthinkable. Instead of giving in, she fought back. She began speaking publicly about her condition, first nervously, then boldly. She turned the same internet that destroyed her into her stage. She delivered a viral TEDx talk that inspired millions. She published best-selling books sharing her story, offering hope to those who felt broken or unwanted. She even worked with lawmakers to help pass legislation against cyberbullying in the United States, proving that her suffering would not end with silence. Today, she is recognized not as the ugliest woman, but as a survivor who turned humiliation into power. Her body never changed. Her weight never increased. But she reclaimed the one thing the world tried to strip from her: her humanity. Number 8. The woman who lived with another's face. In 2004, a single gunshot blast destroyed Connie Culp's face. The shot came not from a stranger, but from her own husband, Thomas, who in a drunken rage fired a shotgun at her after a violent argument. The blast shattered her nose, cheeks, mouth, and the bones that held them in place. Her eyes survived, but everything below them was left mangled and torn away. She was barely alive when she reached the hospital. Doctors managed to save her, but survival came with unimaginable cost. For years, she lived with one of the most severe disfigurements ever seen in a survivor. Her face was sunken, scarred, and missing vital structures. She breathed through a hole in her throat. She could not eat, smell, or speak normally. She endured more than 30 reconstructive surgeries, but nothing restored her basic functions. Then, in December 2008, surgeons at the Cleveland Clinic attempted something radical. Connie underwent a 22-hour near-total face transplant, the first of its kind in the United States. Doctors replaced nearly 80% of her face: skin, bone, muscles, nerves, blood vessels, and even her sinuses. The operation was not only about appearance, it gave her back the ability to smell, eat, drink, speak, and even smile. It was one of the most complex medical transplants in history, hailed as a milestone for reconstructive surgery. But the miracle came at a price. To keep her body from rejecting the donor tissue, Connie had to remain on heavy immunosuppressant drugs for life, leaving her vulnerable to infections and complications. She also had to live with the reality that much of her identity was now built from another woman's face. Meanwhile, the man who nearly killed her tried to kill himself after pulling the trigger. Thomas Culp turned the gun on himself in a failed suicide attempt, but he survived. He was later convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to 7 years in prison. In one of the most shocking turns, Connie later said she had forgiven him, insisting she did not want to carry hatred for the rest of her life. Despite the trauma, Connie became an advocate for organ donation and for survivors of domestic violence. She showed the world that a woman disfigured by violence could still live, speak, and inspire. In July 2020, Connie Culp's life came to a tragic end. She died at the age of 57, not from her transplant, but from an infection related to the immunosuppressive therapy she required to survive with it. Connie's story is both horrifying and heroic. She left behind a legacy that changed medicine and gave hope to others living with injuries once thought beyond repair. Number 7. The Bear Woman. Julia Pastrana was born in Mexico in 1834, with 2 rare conditions that changed the course of her life forever. She had hypertrichosis terminalis, which caused thick black hair to cover nearly every part of her body, and gingival hyperplasia, which made her gums and lips grow abnormally large. Together, these features gave her an appearance that society at the time labeled monstrous. To the world, she became a spectacle, paraded across Europe and the United States as the Bear Woman, or the world's ugliest woman. But behind the cruel labels, Julia was far more than what gawkers saw. She was an accomplished dancer and singer, fluent in multiple languages, and described by those who knew her as intelligent and kind. Still, she was denied dignity at every turn. Even her marriage brought exploitation. She wed her manager, Theodore Lent, who used her condition to make money, displaying her to packed crowds who stared in horror and fascination. Julia's life ended tragically in 1860. After giving birth to a son who inherited her conditions, both mother and baby died within days of each other. Any hope for peace ended there. Instead of mourning her, Lent saw new profit. He had Julia's body embalmed and continued to exhibit her corpse, displaying her remains as if she were still a living attraction. After his death, the exhibitions continued. For more than a century, her body was passed from sideshows to collectors, then eventually placed in storage. It was kept in warehouses and later ended up in a dark storage room at the University of Oslo in Norway. There it remained for decades, gathering dust and treated not as a woman who had lived and suffered, but as a specimen to be hidden away. It was not until 2013 that her story finally reached a turning point. It took years of campaigning by Mexican artist and activist Laura Anderson Barbata, who petitioned Norwegian authorities and argued that Julia deserved dignity, not display. Finally, after international pressure and approval from Norway's Ministry of Culture, her body was released. Julia Pastrana's remains were flown back to her home state of Sinaloa, Mexico, and buried in February 2013 in a Catholic ceremony attended by community members and officials. For the first time in nearly 2 centuries, she was laid to rest with dignity. The world had once called her ugly, but in death, she was finally recognized as human. Number 6. The Woman Without a Face. Born in a poor village in West Bengal, India, Khadija Khatun has lived her entire life without a face. From the very beginning, doctors knew something was wrong. Her eyelids were so heavy she could not open her eyes for days after birth. When they finally lifted, it revealed a nightmare. Her skin had grown abnormally, swelling in thick folds that buried her features. Her cheeks twisted into lumps, her lips barely formed, and her mouth remained nothing more than a small slit on the side of her face. To this day, no one even knows for certain if she has a nose. The condition, believed to be neurofibromatosis, causes uncontrollable tumor growth and tissue deformities. What happened next is quite disturbing. Instead of receiving care, Khadija was hidden from the world. Her father would drag her to busy streets, cover her body in shawls, and force her to beg. Strangers pointed, stared, and snapped photos as if she was an exhibit, not a girl. Some threw coins at her. Others walked away in horror. Her struggles went far beyond humiliation. Eating has always been an ordeal. With only a slit for a mouth, she cannot chew properly and must push food in slowly with her fingers, often choking in the process. Breathing is equally terrifying. With no clear nose passage, every cold or fever threatens to suffocate her. Even walking outside is a cruel test. She cannot see clearly, so every step risks a fall, while people on the street whisper and laugh at the sight of her face. When her case finally caught public attention, campaigns raised money for treatment. Doctors came forward offering free surgery. But then came the unthinkable. Specialists warned that cutting into her face could kill her on the operating table. Her poor family froze in fear, unable to decide. And Khadija? She refused the chance to change her life. She told doctors she would rather live with the deformity than risk dying under the knife. Her mother admits the deformities only worsened as she grew older. Every doctor eventually gave up. Yet Khadija still says, "I'm made this way, and I accept it graciously." Number 5. The teen who aged too soon. From the moment she was old enough to walk into a classroom, Zara Hartshorn knew she wasn't like the other children. While they looked young and full of life, Zara's face was full of wrinkles. She was still a child, but strangers thought she was middle-aged. Some even asked her if she was her own classmate's mother. Zara suffers from lipodystrophy, a cruel and rare disorder where the body destroys its own fat tissue. Without fat beneath the skin, her face collapsed into deep lines. Her cheeks hollowed, her lips thinned, and the skin on her body sagged decades before it should have. This wasn't just about appearance. Lipodystrophy also carries hidden killers: diabetes, liver disease, heart problems, and the possibility of early death. By her teenage years, Zara looked older than her own mother. People mistook them for sisters, and her mother had to explain to strangers that the older woman beside her was actually her daughter. The cruelty she endured was relentless. Bullies tormented her so badly that she dropped out of school. She avoided mirrors, terrified of her own reflection. At just 16, something incredible happened. Doctors performed a facelift, a surgery meant for people in their 60s, to pull her sagging skin tighter and give her a chance to live without shame. The results gave her a fresher look, but nothing could erase the years of pain. Zara later admitted the surgery gave her a taste of normal life, but she also knew it was only skin deep. The disease itself remained, threatening her health in ways no knife could fix. Zara eventually something no one expected. Instead of hiding, she turned her condition into a cause. She began raising awareness about lipodystrophy, telling the world it was not just cosmetic, but a deadly illness that needed recognition. Now in her early 30s, she continues her fight not just for herself, but for everyone born with the same cruel condition. Number 4. The woman with 4 legs. In 1868, in a small Texas town, a baby girl was born who would immediately stun doctors and horrify neighbors. Josephine Myrtle Corbin came into the world with dipygus, a congenital condition where the body duplicates itself from the waist down. She had not one pelvis, but 2. From them grew 4 legs. 2 were fully formed and strong enough to walk. The other 2 were thinner, weaker, and hung alongside them like ghost limbs. Doctors were shocked to discover she could move all 4, though the smaller legs could not bear her weight. Myrtle's body made her a spectacle from the very beginning. She was put on display as a sideshow curiosity, gawked at by crowds who paid to stare at the girl with 4 legs. For her, the humiliation never truly ended. People did not see a child, they saw a deformity. And yet, her life was far more complicated than the cruel labels suggested. Despite her condition, Myrtle married a man named Clinton Bicknell. Against every prediction, she went on to have 5 healthy children. But the price was constant pain. With duplicated organs and abnormal anatomy, she suffered from chronic infections that left her weak and ill for much of her life. In a time when many babies with severe congenital defects never lived past infancy, Myrtle's survival into adulthood was extraordinary. But even death gave her no peace. When she died in 1928, grave robbers tried to steal her body, seeking to profit from her unique anatomy. Her family had to guard her grave, and her remains were encased in concrete, to prevent her from being taken. Number 3. Burned alive, yet forced to live. It only took a few seconds for Jacqueline's life to change forever. In September 1999, Jacqueline Saborito, a 20-year-old Venezuelan student living in Texas, accepted a ride home after a party. She had no idea that a drunk driver was speeding toward them on the same road. The collision was head-on. 2 of her friends died instantly. Jacqueline was still alive but trapped in the front seat when the car burst into flames. She could not move. Fire immediately swallowed her body as she screamed. By the time rescuers pulled her out, her skin had melted, her hair burned away, and her face was gone. 60% of her body had been destroyed in less than a minute. Doctors worked frantically. They saved her life, but survival came with a cruelty that felt almost worse than death. Her nose was gone. Her eyelids burned away, leaving her eyes exposed and painfully dry. Her ears had melted to nothing. Her fingers fused into stubs that later had to be amputated. The beautiful young woman in her college photos was unrecognizable. She admitted later, "Before, I was normal. Now, I'm not." More than 120 surgeries followed. Surgeons tried to rebuild what the fire had taken, grafting skin, reconstructing her face piece by piece. But no amount of surgery could erase what happened in those burning seconds. She could not blink on her own, could not eat without help, and needed daily care just to survive. The emotional toll was crushing. She hid from mirrors because her reflection was unbearable. And yet, Jacqueline refused to disappear. Instead, she allowed her face to be seen by millions, lending her pain to anti-drunk driving campaigns so others would never suffer as she had. The drunk driver walked away with only minor injuries and later served a short sentence before returning to normal life. Jacqueline never had that chance, but rather than surrender, she chose to keep speaking out. Every scar, every surgery, every cruel glance was part of her burden. Yet she carried it. In 2019, cancer finally ended her life at only 40 years old. But even in death, her story remains one of extraordinary endurance. Jacqueline Saborito's life was not defined by the flames that disfigured her. It was defined by the courage it took to live after them. Number 2. The acid attack survivor. Just 1 second after a stranger stopped her on the street, Katie Piper's face was burning off. The 25-year-old model and TV presenter had stepped out of her London apartment in March 2008, heading to an internet cafe when the man approached. Thinking he was asking for spare change, Katie reached for her purse. In that instant, he hurled sulfuric acid directly at her face. The chemical ripped through her skin, eating away at her eyelids, nose, lips, and throat. It soaked into her chest and hands. Katie later said, "I was burning really badly, and I knew my face was falling off." Blinded in one eye, barely able to breathe, she staggered into a cafe, trying desperately to wash the acid away. But water could not stop the destruction. The attacker was Stefan Sylvester, only 19, but he hadn't chosen his victim randomly. He had been sent by Katie's ex-boyfriend, Danny Lynch, a steroid-fueled martial arts fighter who had already held Katie hostage for 8 hours of brutal abuse. When she broke off the relationship, he swore she would never smile again. Listening on the phone as the acid melted her face, he stayed silent, satisfied. Katie was placed in a medically induced coma for 10 days. Doctors told her parents she might not live. When she awoke, she wrote on a clipboard, "Am I dead? Am I blind? Kill me." Every layer of skin had been burned away. Surgeons removed her face entirely, then began rebuilding it using skin grafts and collagen from cow tissue. Over the years, she endured more than 400 operations. She survived, but she refused to be hidden. Katie rebuilt her career, became a best-selling author, founded a charity for burn survivors, and told the world, "I want to be the woman who lived, not the woman who was destroyed." She returned to television with the same confidence she had before the attack, this time carrying the scars openly as proof of her fight. She used her voice to push for tougher laws against acid attacks, mentored other survivors, and turned her pain into purpose. Every scar became part of her strength. Every setback another chance to prove she would not be silenced. Number 1. The woman with the longest neck. At just 25 years old, Ludmila Tichinova stunned the world with a body that defied normal proportions. Her neck measured an extraordinary 7 inches long, so elongated that she was called the woman with the longest neck. But her striking appearance wasn't just a quirk of nature. It was the result of Marfan syndrome, a rare and dangerous connective tissue disorder. From childhood, her body grew differently. Her arms stretched longer than her classmates. Her spine curved in ways that made sitting and standing painful. Doctors knew the truth. Marfan doesn't just reshape the body on the outside. It weakens the heart, stretches the aorta, and can lead to sudden, catastrophic rupture. Behind the fascination with her neck was a constant medical risk she could never ignore. Growing up visibly different was torment. Strangers stared at her in the street. She felt isolated, self-conscious, like her body betrayed her at every turn. The spinal curvature left her exhausted, and the weight of her long neck often made her head feel heavy, like carrying a burden she couldn't set down. The attention she received was rarely kind. To many, she was a spectacle. To herself, she was just a girl trying to survive a body she couldn't control. Ludmila refused to let Marfan define her entirely. She embraced her uniqueness and began presenting herself publicly, proving that difference does not mean inability. She used her visibility to raise awareness about Marfan syndrome, reminding others that rare physical traits often come with hidden health battles. Despite the spinal pain, the exhaustion, and the constant risk to her heart, she pushed forward. She learned to carry herself with dignity, became a symbol of self-acceptance, and inspired others living with rare conditions to face the world with courage. Which of these stories inspired you the most? Comment down